Thank you so much, Rochelle. And thank you all again for joining us tonight. To Rochelle's point, you could have been anywhere else, but you decided to be here, and I'm elated to be here with you all. So I want to just set the tone for this evening. I am the facilitator, but I am not always the expert. And so if there are thoughts and opinions that you have that are different, or concerns and questions that you would like to articulate, please be sure to use the Q&A, the chat area. You can also raise your hand. Although we can't see each other, I do want to make sure that this is an engaging opportunity. And so please feel free to drop your thoughts and concerns throughout the presentation. Myself and Ms. Lindsay will be checking throughout. And so let's go ahead and get started. What I want to guarantee to you in this moment, or in the 45 minutes that we are together at this, that this is a judgment-free zone. Please feel free to express yourself in whatever way you feel necessary. I promise you that I'll be honest with you. If you have questions, I'm going to give you the best answer that I have. And if I don't know, I'm okay with telling you that I don't know. This is a space for you to recover and renew your spirit. So again, we're going to do a lot around coping skills and have some really robust discussion, and then just a chance to move forward. My hope for all of you by the end of the presentation tonight, that you feel really invigorated and excited about the great things that will be coming in the new year. And so before we start, I really want you all to use the chat to talk to me about what 2020 was like, right? And so I dropped just a couple of pictures and thoughts that I've had or I've heard, whether it be on social media or in conversations with friends. But for you all, what was 2020? Please do not utilize this as just this is just a guide. And so if you have other thoughts about what 2020 was, please let's drop them in the chat. And I am just interested in hearing what 2020 was like for you all. And I'll give you a few seconds to start that. And I'll be checking in the chat as we go along. And I'll start with myself. On a personal level, I felt like 2020 was transformative for me. Some of the things that I had used before to kind of distract me from things that were going on, I didn't necessarily have. And so I really had to focus and shift my energy on myself, working on my health and fitness, my wellness, a business. And then it also felt a little stressful. There were times that I absolutely felt overwhelmed. My running joke is that I felt like we were in Hunger Games. If anybody has seen the movie Hunger Games, that is what 2020 felt like for me often. And so for you all, what was 2020 like? I'm going to go to the chat and pull a couple of things if I can. And Rochelle, for some reason, I'm not able to see the chat. Are you able to go in and just kind of see some of the things that
yes, I see someone said it was a roller coaster and a gift. It was definitely a shift, a little bit of stressful with kids being home, inspiring for new entrepreneur opportunities. Absolutely. And looking at a career shift.
Okay, I love it. So it sounds like a lot of people were stressed, but also very optimistic and pivoting, I can see, which is what we're going to talk a little bit more about. And so as you think of things, please feel free to drop them. Again, I'll be checking the chat, or Rochelle will be as well. So here's the hard truth, right? So despite popular belief, there is only a small percentage of us that just wake up every morning and know exactly what it is that we want to do. That have always had a very general idea about where we were supposed to be, right? And that could be regarding our careers, our relationships with our friends, just in general, right? And at some point in our lives, we've all made ill-advised decisions. We did something because we didn't know any better. There's an old saying, when you know better, you do better. Sometimes we just haven't known better. And unfortunately, those decisions have impacted us tremendously, right? The other fact is that failure is necessary. It helps us to grow. In order for us to learn, we have to fail at something. And so for a lot of us, 2020 felt like an epic fail, for lack of a better word. But think about all of the things and possibilities in terms of what you learned about yourself, what you learned about your ability to push through, and how resilient you showed up despite what was going on. And no matter how hard you try, some things cannot be repaired. It's almost like that really nice car, or maybe your first car that you got right out of high school and you drove it. And somewhere around year 5 or 6, you realized that you had spent way more money trying to fix the car than the car was actually worth. And so at some point you had to make a decision that it was time to just get another car. And so life is like that sometimes. Despite our best energy and efforts, things just don't work out as they plan. And so those are the times where we really have to consider how we pivot. And so really what it means to pivot by definition, it means just to turn or rotate. But we hear this word often in popular culture. And so in culture, it just simply means to rethink, reset, reposition when things don't go as planned. And so many of us, I saw this in the chat, have decided to pivot. Perhaps the job that I had wasn't as stable as I thought. And so I had to start thinking of ways where I could market myself as an individual and start that first business, right? Perhaps I was in a relationship that I thought was really great, but after being quarantined with them for a few weeks, I realized I probably didn't like them as much as I thought I would. And so I made a decision to rethink or reconsider, reset, and reposition. And pretty much the pivot is just our way of starting over when things don't go as planned. And so we think about resetting. For me, a reset means just to renew your spirit or to kind of re-energize yourself, right? And part of that process is to be honest. In order for you to start over and to reset, you have to be honest about what has happened. And for most of us, if we're being honest, we kind of go around with blinders on. Things happen. We don't necessarily give ourselves time to reconnect and rethink what happened. And so we just kind of float through things. Things happen. We just keep pushing through. They call that being strong. But the idea is that you want to be resilient. And part of pushing ourselves to be resilient is that we have to be honest about what's happening. And so if I am in a situation and I realize that things are not going the way that they should, I have to be honest with myself enough to know that, you know what, this might be an opportunity for me to change some things and to do some things different. Giving yourself credit. We often don't show ourselves the same amount of grace that we show to others, right? Think about it. When you fail at something and you don't do as well, we tend to beat ourselves up. But if it were to happen to somebody else, say a good friend, we're always supportive, pushing them to try it again, don't give up. But we don't necessarily do that for ourselves. And so as you begin this space of, renewing your spirit, making sure that you give yourself credit for what went well. So even if things didn't go as planned, think about what went well. Think about how you showed up despite the fact that things were not going as planned, and give yourself some grace. Acknowledge both the positive and the negative outcomes. Everything can't be completely bad. There's something positive there that you need to hone in on and pay more attention to. Practice gratitude. That's one of the most simple things that we can do, being thankful for the opportunity. So even if I didn't necessarily win in the way that I thought that I should, the opportunity was presented to me and I'm grateful for it. Decide what to let go of. I've noticed a lot of people, particularly when I look at my social media feed, just thinking about the relationships that they've had prior to COVID and quarantine and some of the unrest that we saw in 2020. And they realized that a lot of people that had been in their circle for quite some time were not really the best friends, or they weren't as close as they thought they were to people. And so in these instances, when we think about that reset in preparation for a pivot, we have to decide what things we need to let go of. And so if you've been working on a business plan and 2020 was the year that you realized that it probably wouldn't work, what things do you need to let go? What ideas should you just take off the drawing board? They won't work. When you think about your relationships, who are the people in my space and in my circle who do not give me the type of love and support that I desire? And making a decision about letting those things and people go. Surround yourself with positivity. It is important as you begin to pivot that you are around people and surround yourself with things that remind you of all the wonderful things that you can do, as opposed to people and things that remind you of what has gone wrong. Develop some self-care. And that may look like today is just not a day for me to try to do anything because I'm not mentally there. And so today, as part of me showing grace to myself, I'm going to take a break. I'm going to exercise. I'm going to go for a walk. Perhaps I'll do some yoga and I'll meditate, or even go for a massage that I've been putting off for weeks. But in order to reset, you have to feel okay. And if you're not okay, that means that you need to definitely check in on your self-care practices. And last but not least, a part of the reset and renewal of your spirit is to do more of what makes you happy. Write a list of all of the things that put a smile on your face. Tap into some of those things that you enjoyed as a child. I'll just speak for myself personally. I love coloring. And so there are some days where it's a little rough. And so sometimes I'll sit and just color because it makes me happy and it renews my spirit. And so in this space, as we prepare to pivot, those are some things that you definitely need to consider. Before I move forward, are there any thoughts or comments in the chat that I should be looking at, Ms. Lindsay?
Here, hold on.
Okay.
Transformation. Someone said they found themselves. So that was really good. And then another person said that they like the idea of resetting.
Yeah, yeah. And transformation, I think if we're reflecting, right, when we think about 2020, for a lot of people, it was a transformative period for you. You got to see the world very differently. I think that we use a lot of things to distract us, right? So for most of us, particularly those of us that are millennials and older, we use a lot of social media, we work very hard. And so those things became distractions. But the moment that we had to really sit down and sit with ourselves, we realized that there were a lot of things that we were feeling, a lot of sources of power that we had not tapped into. And so for people who were able to push through and manage those things, I am pretty sure they experienced a transformation. So thank you for putting that in the chat. So the next part of the pivot is to rethink, right? And rethinking is, how do we recover? So one of the things in a quote that I love to look at is the 3 things you can't recover from, right? And that's the moment after it's missed, the word after it's said, and the time after it's wasted. And so when you go to rethink your strategy, whether it's in your personal life or professional life, these are just some things to consider. If I don't do these things, I can't recover from them. I can't recover the moment, because once it has passed, it has passed. If I say something, it has been said and I can't take it back. I can apologize, but the words have been said, right? And the time after it's been wasted. And so when we start to rethink how we recover, these are just some things to keep in mind. So being mindful of negative self-talk. Here's the thing, we are often our harshest critics. And so even when we have the capacity and resources to do something, we get stuck in our minds and we start to have these defeating conversations. So even before we start ruminating about what we didn't do well. You can't do this. You won't be able to make it through. You don't have enough money. You don't have enough time. This relationship won't work because none of the others work. Maybe it's me. You have to get out of your head about it, right? And so one of the things to do in order to manage that self-talk is to really think about if it's true. So if I am saying these things, what evidence do I have that any of the thoughts that I'm having are really reasonable or rational? And if there is no evidence, then that means that it's not possible that it can be true. So if you've been in 5 relationships, and we'll just use relationships as an example, and only one of them failed, it's not a really rational thought that relationships don't work for you. That relationship didn't work for you, which means that you do have the capacity to be in a relationship, in a healthy relationship, because you've done it before, right? And so again, being mindful of the negative self-talk. For every irrational thought, try to think of a rational thought. Think about if there's evidence of what I'm saying or what I'm feeling. If it's not there, then it can't be true. Embrace the idea that you failed, but it's possible that you can succeed. Someone once said to me that a fail is just your first attempt at learning. And so if you learned something from it, it was not a fail. You take what you learned from each instance and you use that information to build, to reset, and to do something different. But you have to embrace and be open to the idea that things might work out. Otherwise, you get stuck in that sunken place and it becomes even more difficult for you to recover. Consider your options, right? So if I've been planning to launch a business and I see what the competition looks like, who can I reach out to that might be helpful to me? So instead of looking at this person as my competition, how can they help me? Would it be okay for me to reach out to them for mentorship? If I'm struggling in my relationship, do I have people in my inner circle who might be able to support me if I were to ask? Is it possible that I just need to do things differently altogether? Sometimes we get so stuck on an idea that we are not open to the possibility that things could be different if we were just to shift our thoughts just a little bit, right? So when we think about a planning strategy, people always say have a plan A or a plan B. I always say to people, stick with the plan, but have a different strategy. So maybe if your plan is to launch a business in 2021, and perhaps the strategy that you tried before didn't work, continue to change the strategy until you figure out what works, but don't change the plan. The plan is the plan, and you have to stick with it. And last but certainly not least, let go. Let go of the negative self-talk. Let go of the thought of feeling defeated. Also, let go of some of the things you've been holding on to that are holding you back from being your best self. And I think that's one of the places where we really struggle. It's not that we don't have enough. It's the way that we look at what we have and not really being aware that we can utilize whatever it is to do the best that we can. And so we have to let go of the idea that there'll always be something that we need, because if we wait until we have enough money, until we are completely whole, until we find the perfect person, we will never reach a point where we'd be willing to try and just work with what we have. And so when you let go, it means that I'm accepting that this is what I have, and there are improvements that I can make, but I'm willing to let go of the doubt, the idea that I'll fail just to give this a try. And so remembering to be mindful of the negative self-talk, embracing the idea that you can succeed, looking at your options or your resources, and letting go. The other things you want to do again is, instead of just weighing the options, but tapping into your resources as well. Who can help you? Who's available to assist you? Who can provide you with guidance, support, and advice? Being uncomfortable with, being comfortable with being uncomfortable. And so knowing that your discomfort is going to get you where you need to go. In order to grow, you're going to have to be uncomfortable and sit in some very weird places. This is how we learn, and this is how we continue to grow. Nobody wakes up with the roadmap to life that has all of the instructions and all the cheat codes if something goes wrong. You usually have to sit in a place of discomfort for a while in order for you to figure out a different strategy and how to really win, so to speak. And so be okay with being uncomfortable for a while, knowing that it's a part of the growth process. Again, change the strategy, not the plan. Just change the strategy. You don't have to undo everything that you've done. Your plan is your plan, but be open to the idea that there is another strategy and a way for you to do this. And then plan to win. And essentially, when we talk about winning, it isn't just about instant gratification, but let me be open to the experience. All of the things that I've been through have led me to this point. How do I win? What does that look like for me? Is me winning in a relationship necessarily getting married, or does it mean I just have a healthy relationship? Does me winning in business mean making a certain amount of income, or is it just the idea that even during a tumultuous time in my life, I was able to push myself enough to get to this point? And so you have to really quantify and really evaluate what a win looks like for you, but plan for it, whatever it is. Keep saying to yourself, I got this, I am going to win. No matter how minimal the win is, it is a win nonetheless. Any questions in the chat or comments in the chat, Ms. Lindsay, before I move forward?
Yes, we have someone who asks, how do you support others while avoiding becoming a reservoir for negative energy?
I love that question. That is an amazing question. So part of that, and we talked about this during a previous conversation, is setting boundaries. One of the things that I love to tell people, and I'm the middle child, so everybody calls me for everything, is that sometimes you have to tell people that you don't have the capacity. So if someone is calling you, or you are the strong friend who helps everybody, you are the strong person at work who's always leaning in to help, or you're the strong person in your relationship, it is okay to redefine the boundaries in all of those instances and tell people when you don't have the capacity. If you don't do so, people will expect for you to show up in the way that you have, and they're not even aware that you're not okay. And so part of that is thinking about, how am I showing up in these spaces that makes people believe that it is okay for me to be the reservoir? And so you have to consider, how am I showing up? What are the things that I should be saying to these people that I'm not saying? And how do I go about setting some firmer boundaries with them so that they are aware that it's not okay for you to do this? I love you and I care for you, but I don't have the capacity today. I would say no is probably one of the most important things that you can learn to say at this juncture in your life. If you haven't said it, it's a great time to start. But saying no and letting people know when you don't have the capacity, it's really okay. They will figure it out.
One question that came up with, what are some, and I don't know if this is appropriate time, but how do you reset? What does resetting look like?
Mm-hmm. And so if you think about it in this instance, and I want to answer this in a very general sense, because I'm not sure if, a reset for whomever asked this looks different, but it's almost like starting over, right? So if you were to go back to the drawing board, and we'll just use a relationship for this example, but if there are some things that you have felt very uncomfortable about in that space, going back, reevaluating what is happening, and then maybe even making just some goals, which we'll talk about shortly, just around how you want to see things change, but then also taking the steps to do so. And so a reset is almost like if you were playing your favorite game. I know Xbox 5s are super popular. At some point, you got to reset that game and start over. Or you have to log off and log back in. And so when you think about it, a reset is just an opportunity for you to start over and to re-engage in a similar situation, but in a different way. And I hope that answered your question. Any other questions, Ms. Lindsay, before I move forward?
No, not at this time.
Okay, awesome. And so the final step is to reposition yourself. And really, here we're just talking about how you move forward. One of the quotes that I love, it says, reposition yourself. To change your situation, you have to change your position. And so when you think about it, if things are not going as planned, is it smart for me to just sit here, or do I need to reposition myself? Is there somewhere else that I need to be, a different way that I need to be looking at this, a different strategy that I need to have in mind? How do I move forward? And some of that just requires that we move and be willing to change and essentially pivot. So, and I am a huge fan of the lady on this picture, so you all don't judge me, but reclaim your time. There is a scene in the movie The Color Purple that I think about where Celie walks out into this field. And she says, I'm here. And it's not that she had not been present, but it was the fact that she wanted people to know that she was finally there. It was almost like she had arrived. And so part of the repositioning is sometimes you have to walk into spaces and let people know, I am here. I am truly here. Everything that you may have thought about me is wrong. This is who I am. I am here to reclaim my time. This is my space. I'm going to take everything that I need. I'm going to ask for what I want. I'm going to ask for help. I'm going to set boundaries. But reclaim your time in whatever way you see fit and necessary for this part of your life. You also want to make sure that you set SMART goals. You know, we're clear that SMART goals are specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based. But one of the things that I think is important for us to note is that they have to matter. A lot of times we just sit and we write goals. We have a big idea, we just start writing out stuff. And if it doesn't matter to you and it is not important, it is unlikely that you'll really accomplish any of those goals, right? So one of the things that I like to tell people to do is you write the SMART goals, write down some objectives or some baby steps that you can take. And so for you, if this is your year that you wanted to launch your business or you wanted to do something for yourself, start writing out what the overall goal is and then take it step by step. So step one is I need to apply for an LLC. Check that off your box. Step two is that I need to have articles of confederation. Whatever it is that you need, take it in baby steps. And as you go along, just make a checklist so that you are giving yourself credit and you're able to see your growth over time instead of writing a huge goal that you know will take you 6 months as opposed to 6 weeks. And so when you think about goals, you think about the short term and the long term. Is it better for me to set some short term goals because these are more attainable given the space that I'm in? Or is it better for me to focus on long term goals? And I think that we tend to do better with short term because you see some quick gains. And so if that's the trick that you have to play, do what you need to do, but make sure that those goals are meaningful to you. Otherwise, you're just writing things down for the heck of it. Detach from the outcome and commit to the process. One of the things that I usually bring to my clients' attention is that we get so caught up on the idea of the outcome that we miss the experience, right? And so that essentially means is that when things are happening, because we are so caught up in the hustle and bustle of things, that we don't pay attention to all the amazing things that have happened in between, right? We've all had a stressful job or a stressful internship. We've been in a relationship that wasn't that great. And those are the things that we focus on, right? And so when we start to pivot, we want to go from point A to point B really, really quickly. But there are so many points in between there where some amazing things may happen that you miss because you were so caught up on the idea of it. So think about those of you who launched or started a business this year. Yes, it may have been hard. There may have been some highs and lows. Maybe you didn't meet that income goal, or maybe you did. But then what are all the things that happened, the experiences that happened in between? Did you have a great time with some friends who stayed up with you and helped you prepare things that you had to ship out? Did you get some great advice? Like those are the things that we need to be as focused on instead of just the outcome. We got to be committed to the process and be open to the experience. And last but not least, you just have to do it. There isn't a lot of conversation that you have when you're about to pivot. You write down a plan and you execute it. You have to go for it, right? Winston Churchill says, if you're going through hell, just keep going. And that's the attitude that you have to have. Every step of it, I'm going to keep going. And if I need to pivot a little bit, I need to change my strategy, that's okay, but I will not quit on myself. This has to work. And that is the attitude that you have to have. And so whether it be around your business, again, your personal life, your mental health, I have to keep going. It is necessary. And I know that if I don't do this, it'll be a regret for me. And so that is what I hold on to. One of the things I love to say to people is that when you think about quitting, think about why you held on in the first place. What got you here? What was the thing that motivated you? Maybe it was a child, maybe it was a parent, maybe it was friends, maybe it was just the idea that I can be something bigger than what people have said about me. And if that's what motivated you to start, let that be the reason why you finish. And so I'm going to go, or Ms. Lindsay, if you can go to the chat, if there are any thoughts or questions that you all have, let's go for it.
So we have a question that I received to ask about setting boundaries.
Okay. Are they just asking in general how to set boundaries, or
how to set boundaries?
okay. So one, when you go about setting boundaries, you want to be clear about the changes that you want to see in the relationship or even in the communication patterns with the person, if that's the issue. And so let's just say, again, if it's related to a relationship or even your relationship with your peers at work, maybe you're being asked to do too much. Think about what the issues are. Be very clear about what you want the outcome to be, and then set your boundaries accordingly. So, for example, if you are struggling in a space where you feel like you are the only one that's showing up and being present in your relationship, and you feel like the commitment from your spouse may not be there, one of the things that you want to do is to start considering, what do I want to see change? And so when you have that conversation, you can say, hey, I've noticed these things and I would like to see these changes. And I think in order for that to happen, here's some boundaries that I think we need to have in place. And boundaries really look like a level setting of expectations, right? So it demonstrates to people how you want to be treated, but then it also tells them how you plan to show up for them. And so, again, if you are working in a space that tends to be a little toxic or you're feeling overwhelmed, your boundary will start with, here's some things that I noticed, or here's how I'm experiencing this environment. Here's what I would like to see change. And here are some things that I'm going to implement to ensure that they don't happen. And here's what I can give to you in return. But it's almost like you're just level setting your expectations and providing, some very succinct things about what you want to see happen and be better.
Awesome.
And sometimes setting a boundary starts with a no.
No is a complete sentence, right?
Yeah.
Another person asks, how do you, which is a really good question, how do you keep, or what ways can you keep yourself motivated when you're feeling extreme burnout? And I think this applies for people in their personal lives, especially when we're looking at the times that we're living in with COVID, and people have kids at home and still have to maintain the same level of work quality. So that, I think that would be one area if you can address. And then I think the other area is that people in the new year, as you talked about earlier, may have wanted a different challenge in their workspace, or may want to take the leap of, a new career because they're feeling burned out on their current job. So can you talk a little bit about, keeping yourself motivated, one, and being connected to your family, and being, I guess what we say, present in your daily interactions with your family. And then maybe the secondary is to help people understand how to stay motivated in their current workspace as they begin to think about exploring a new career option.
Okay. So I'm going to start with just addressing the issue around motivation, or how to stay motivated. So one of the things you want to be very clear about is if what you're being asked to do or what you have obligated yourself to do is something that you feel passionate about, right? And what I often notice, particularly for millennials and generations older than us, is sometimes we lose our motivation when we are not there, and meaning our heart is not in it, right? So if you're thinking about your job and you've noticed over the past year or so that you have literally lost your motivation, you show up to the Zoom meeting and you are just there. And so one of the things you want to consider is, this what I really want to be doing? Is this my passion? Have I reached a stopping point where I may need to pivot a bit and think about if there are other opportunities for me, right? So starting there, considering if this is something that you are passionate about, and is that a reason why you've lost your motivation? The other thing is, when we think about burnout, being sure that you're practicing self-care, right? So I know that for many of you, you wear multiple hats: your parents, your caregivers, you are friends to others, you work a job, own a business. There's a lot going on, but it is important for you to remember that you are the reason why you get up every day. If you are not okay, you can't take care of other people, you can't do these other things that you've obligated yourself to. And so making sure that as you begin to start to feel burned out, that you take a pause and practice self-care. One of the things that I always tell people in a workspace, that if you were to pass out tomorrow, and not be able to return. Somebody's going to send your family a get well card, and they're going to replace you if they need to. And so when you're thinking about the work environment, your name is not on the door if you don't own the building. It is okay for you to take time to practice self-care. But again, if you are feeling that lack of motivation, am I passionate about this? Am I just tired and burned out? And if so, do I need to take a break from this? How do I reshift my energy? And some of it just means stepping away from things for a little bit. Sometimes you've been at something so long that you have literally exhausted yourself. And so it may mean, let me just step back for a minute. I love what I'm doing. I'm passionate about it, but I realize that I just don't have the capacity to do this in the way that I want to. And so maybe it's something that I table, and it's not that I'm quitting. I'm going to come back to it, but right now I just don't feel motivated, and I need to try to renew my spirit and figure out how I get back to the place where I started. And Rochelle, and please help me to remember the question. And so the other part of it was more so about how we show up in terms of being present with our families if we're feeling burned out.
Yes.
Okay. So again, this is very simple. I've said this a million times because I really hope that it registers with someone. Some things you just have to say no to. The other piece is I don't have the capacity. I just don't. If you are not okay, you can't take care of other people. And so those are things that you have to express to people. But again, be mindful of how you show up in spaces. If you are always the person who is willing to go the extra mile, if you are the one who's willing to compromise your self-care and your well-being to take care of other people, or you say yes to things when you should say no, when you're tired, you keep pushing. Those are things that you have to be accountable for and be mindful about changing. People treat you the way that you allow them to and the way that you show them you would like to be treated. And so if you never say no, or if you ever tell people, I don't have the capacity, I don't have time, not right now, I need 10 minutes to myself, people expect for you to function in the way that you have always showed up. And for some of you, it may be a little robotic. Like people are not even aware that you have feelings that you're tired because you just go. I'm just going. And so that is the part that we're responsible for. If you feel tired, it's okay to tell people that you're tired. I don't have it, and I won't have it tomorrow either. But the point is, you have to start articulating how you feel and showing people how to treat you.
I love that. I don't have it and I will not have it tomorrow. I think that is important because I know a lot of times we reset for 24 hours and then we show back up. And a lot of times that's just not enough time. And so I love the fact that you allow for our attendees, you've given them permission, right, to one, reset, and then two, giving them the motivation to set those boundaries.
Yeah.
One question that came up is that when we're talking about the new year early on and setting goals, what are some resources that you would recommend for people who constantly set goals and don't achieve them? Or they write down goals and they're like, you know what, I'll start on Monday. Oh, I didn't get it done. I'll start on Thursday, right? The perpetual goal setter is what I call it. That's my coin now, with perpetual goal setters. What is some of that you would give our perpetual goal setters and resources for people who are ready to, be serious and set goals for the new year?
So it's not even per se about a resource, right? Because you can find a goal planner, a vision board, which I hate, by the way. I'm so sorry, you all. Those are things that are tangible, right? But when you think about setting goals, you have to be realistic about where you are, right? So one of the things that I committed to this year, at January 1, I said, you know what, I'm not in a space to set goals because I'm not sure about what I want this to look like for me. And so I'm going to give myself a few weeks to kind of fork over some things before I start writing goals. I started out with just 3 things. I think sometimes, again, we do this robust list of goals that we just pull out of the air. And there's no direction, there's no intention behind it. There are things that we're just writing down. And when we start out setting goals in that way, it is unlikely that we'll ever accomplish them because they don't matter to us and there was no intention behind it, right? So when you think about a resource, you are the resource. You have to be intentional and strategic about how you plan for your life. And so for you, if you tend to get overwhelmed, because I think that is the bigger issue for people, we see that we wrote down 10 things and only 2 of them are doable, we just quit. And so again, thinking about short-term goals, if it is easier for me to write a goal for this week, then that's where I will shift my energy. Some people don't do well planning for 3 to 6 months at a time. It's just not doable for them because they don't think that far in advance and they don't operate in that way. And so even if you print just like a weekly goal sheet, which you can find online, There are also passion planners for those of you who like visual things and you want to be able to reflect. There are a number of planners that you can use. And I wish I had it with me. There's one that I purchased in Target, and you literally just set your goals for the day. But it asks you some questions about how you set your intention. What's your mantra for the day? What will happen if you don't meet these goals? What are some things that you anticipate getting your way? But the point of it is that it makes you really think about what you are about to write. And so if I know that it's 8 o'clock in the morning and my goal is by 12 o'clock to have worked out, eaten lunch, and seen 5 clients, that is not realistic for me. And so I'm not going to write that down because I've thought about all of the things that may stop me from committing to this goal and really being focused on it. And so I'm more intentional. Maybe I can do 2 of these things today. And so really it's about tapping into to just being self-aware about where you are. If you're not ready to set a goal, don't start. Start with just ideas. Here's some things that I would like to be able to do. And maybe I fork around with that for a month or so. And then at month 3, I start to set some goals or a goal. But be realistic about where you are. If you're the person that plans out every part of your life and it has to be done a certain way, goal setting may not work for you in terms of long term. You need to set weekly goals, but you have to figure out what works for you and develop a cadence that allows you to really craft some goals that are important, that are realistic, and really help you get where you're going instead of just writing things down. But in terms of resources, you can pull a goal sheet from Google. Again, there's Passion Planner, which is super popular. Some people just write a goal for the week in a little notepad. If you have a dry erase board that you write on every day, just put your goal for the day there and start from there. Start where you are, and then just continue to build up that momentum.
That is really, really great advice. I want to give anybody who is still on here the opportunity to ask a question. I'm thinking about the Office of Alumni and Constituent Engagement might do a giveaway of a passion planner to our participants this evening. So stay tuned and from the Office of Alumni. I think another question that has come up is what books, and you are the book connoisseur is what I call it. What are some books as we get ready to wrap up? What are some books that you would suggest people to purchase around this topic?
I have become a huge fan of Brene Brown, and one of the books that I've been reading, and you know this about me, I can probably read a book in a day, but I have been very intentional about reading this book, and it's called Daring Greatly. So that's one that I highly recommend. I think, your choice of book depends on where you are. If you are looking to create some financial goals, The Richest Man in Babylon is a great one. There's one called Girl, Get Your Credit Straight. It just depends on where you are and what it is that you're trying to be intentional about. If you're looking to be inspired, meaning you're just in a really rough place and you just need some source of inspiration, definitely Hillbilly Elegy was on my list of really great books that I've read, but I think it just depends on where you are. One of the resources that I like to use is the Well Read Black Girl. It's an Instagram, and they actually just have a plethora of books, new artists. So it really depends on where you are. But in terms of on my list, I would definitely say Daring Greatly, Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now, if you're just looking to kind of get into a better space mentally. Those are 2 of my recommendations.
Awesome. You received a comment from one of our attendees, said that this is great information. Love the energy and the authenticity. Can you put in the chat box the first book that you mentioned?
Yeah, absolutely. It's Daring Greatly by Brene Brown.
Okay.
And I would say, if you are, my Instagram information is here. I can definitely drop those on my Instagram page tonight. I usually do it on my personal page, but I'm more than happy to drop those. I'm going to put also The Power of Now. If you are experiencing, and this is just, I'm putting this out here because, a lot of the work that I do is around mental health. If there are some things that you're struggling with in that place, the Body Keeps Score is a great resource as well.
While you're putting that in there, one last question, and then we're going to close out tonight's session.
Okay.
the question was, what daily, weekly, and or monthly actions or habits can I adopt that will get me closer to achieving my goal?
Wow. Um, that is a great question. I would say, and this is just me, and I'm more than happy to take some comments and suggestions from the panel, the rest of our attendees tonight. Have a schedule, right? For me, that just works. So I'm very intentional about setting the tone for my day the night before, and so that looks like I have an idea of what my day will look like, so I know what to plan for and how much time I have to focus on the things that matter to me. So that could be getting up and having a practice in the morning where you either pray, meditate, do some yoga just to center yourself and get yourself geared up for the day. Doing a self inventory, like, is today a good day for me to really focus on some of the goals that I've written down? Do I feel okay? If not, who do I need to? Who are my resources that I need to tap into to keep me motivated? And for some people, that may be a podcast, it may be a good friend, or sometimes it's just, prayer with whatever, whomever you believe in. So starting there, again, thinking about if the goal that I set, is it too robust for me? Meaning, is this something that is absolutely tangible? Can I do this today? And if not, what parts of this can I start with? So it could just be having some steps. If my goal for the week is to do A, here are the steps 1, 2, and 3 that I can accomplish that'll make me feel just fine, even if I don't finish. If I can get through step 1 this week, that works for me. But definitely being intentional, having a schedule, setting the tone for your day by practicing self-care, making sure that, and this is something that I feel like I need to say to millennials and generations that are older if they're on the call. Don't ever put more time and attention into someone else's product, job, or space than you would yourself. And so what that looks like is that if I work an 8-hour day, when it's time for me to clock out, I clock out, because it is just important for me to tap into my self-care. Also, to spend an hour working on my business plan if that's what I want to do, check in with my family if that's necessary, or even just take some time to myself. And so things have to be balanced. I think we, again, are always in a space where we have to go. There's deadlines to meet, but you are the most important asset and tool that you have. And you have to take care of yourself and prioritize the things that bring you joy and really make you happy. And so that would be my advice in terms of making sure you keep up with your goals. Make sure they matter, last but not least.
Woo. Well, thank you for that, Ms. Gates. I would definitely say tonight you have dropped some jewels. And I've been on all of them, but I think tonight it really resonated. I know for me, and so I'm sure it resonated with many of the people that's on here. I think the last thing that you said probably resonated with a lot of people. Don't put more hours into your work that you don't put into yourself.
Yeah.
And so if you work 8 hours, passion planner giveaway tonight. I just read the comment. If you check your email, you'll find out about the passion planner giveaway. But that definitely will come out in the next 48 hours. So
awesome. It's a great tool, a great resource for those of you that may just like to write and really unpack things. The passion planner is a great way to start. But if you are like me and you suffer from a little ADD sometimes, just get a sheet of paper and write something down that matters to you for tomorrow.
Yes, and I think my first passion planner actually came from you, Ms. Gates.
Yes, I'm sure it did.
But I will say you definitely dropped some jewels tonight on us. I love a lot of the comments that you made, and I am hoping that everyone is taking something away. As we wrap up this evening, if anybody would like to drop in the chat one thing that they're taking away from here, from the discussion tonight, I think that would be great as a way to pay tribute to, or give tips, if you will, to Ms. Gates, to drop a little this nugget of what you're going to take away from this conversation. And as you do that in the chat box, so she can read the takeaways. Again, I just want to say thank you, Ms. Gates, for taking time out of your evening to offer this wealth of knowledge and resources to us. The information has been recorded and the link will be shared with all of the registered guests and the attendees, as well as for the attendees, you will receive an email from us so you can learn how you can win that passion planner giveaway. I see Michelle Thomas said, reclaim the time. Yes, honey. There's some great, I see some great takeaways. And I think as you are our attendees, or as we closing out the evening and you put in your tools that you're taking away with you, be mindful that you're also allowing for others that was on this call to see what was said and to resonate with them, and to go back to the early part of this conversation. So we are a community, and as a community, we want to be able to support everybody to be the best that they can be. Ms. Gates, do you have any closing remarks?
Oh gosh, no, but thank you so much for the opportunity. It's always a pleasure. I did just want to let people know that if they need to get in touch, if they have additional questions, please feel free to email me at egates@lavendergrovepsychotherapy.com. You can also email Miss Lindsay and she can get you in touch with me as well. And Lavender Grove Psychotherapy on Instagram and Facebook. I will take pictures of those books tonight and post them for you all. But thank you so much. And I'm going to drop the information in the chat as well for those that need
to repost the books if you post it on your website.
Okay.
I will post it on the Alumni at 1975 webpage as well. And that will allow for our guests to also follow you back. With that being said, again, everyone, thank you. I hope that this was a joyful experience for you, and that with that you have a safe and wonderful evening as we bid you a good night.
Good night. Thank you all for having me again.